Welcome folks. In this video I'm going to take you through science paper 2 for the 2023, and we are going to look at question 1 up to question 5, and this paper was written by the external candidate. So let's have the first question. Question B1A, Roman number 1, define the term matter. So we just have to give the definition of matter. Matter is any substance that occupies space, and has mass. So mass, we are looking at the total amount of matter present or contained in a substance, while space tells us the size or the volume of that particular substance. Roman number 2, give the basic unit of matter contained in carbon dioxide. There are 3 types of basic units of matter. The first one, we can say we have atoms, then molecules, ions. Now for this one, we can see that we are dealing with a compound. The first thing that you are supposed to put into consideration if you are dealing with a compound, you need to ask yourself a question like, what type of a compound am I dealing with? Carbon dioxide has a carbon, which is a nonmetal. Then oxygen is also a nonmetal. Whenever we have a compound consisting of nonmetals, that compound is known as a covalent compound. So the question is like indirectly asking us to identify what type of basic unit is found in a covalent compound. So whenever you are given a covalent compound, the answer should be molecule. So we have molecules. If this was like sodium chloride, we know that sodium is a metal. Then chloride, which is chlorine, is a non-metal. The compound formed between a metal and a non-metal is an ionic compound. An ionic compound consists of basic units known as ions. So for ionic compound, we have ions. Covalent compound, we have molecules. Then if it is just an individual element, then you have atoms. Then let's move on to B. B states 2 challenges that have been brought by activities done in a chemical industries. So 2 challenges, we can say it causes air pollution in case of emission of gases, or such as, or maybe industries that involves complete combustion, where we are going to have the carbon dioxide. Then also it may lead to global warming. So we may have this condition also, especially whenever we are dealing with an industry that releases too much of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We may have this condition as a negative impact. Then let's move on to question C. Explain why it is not advisable for learners to enter the laboratory in the absence of a teacher. So the importance of a teacher acts as a supervisor. The teacher, he or she, is there to give guidelines on how to go about the certain experiment. Then the teacher will also tells the learners what to do and also what not to do. So the teacher is just there to command, also to give the go ahead, don't do this, don't do this. So the whole thing, in the absence of a teacher, is same as you don't have a supervisor, so you can do anything regardless of the impact. So we can say because it can result in fatal accidents. Okay, we move on to question 2. Use the knowledge of kinetic theory of matter to answer the questions that follow. Question A. Explain why an inflated balloon which is placed in a refrigerator slowly starts to shrink and reduce in volume. So an inflated balloon is the balloon that has the air inside. Now, after you fill up that balloon, the air inside is hot. So now, what happens if we place that in a fridge? So what will happen is we are going to have the cooling. The air will start to cool down. So now this thing is all about what happens whenever a gas is cooled. So we are expecting to have the change from a gas into a liquid, or sometimes from a gas directly into a solid. It depends with the substance that you are dealing with. If you are dealing with substances that undergo sublimation, you may have sublimation. Regardless of the two, the key point is whether sublimation or whether condensation. The point is the gas will reduce. Now, what is making this to reduce? Whenever a gas or a substance is cooled, it is going to contract. So we are going to have the process of contraction. Now, what is contraction? If you look at the arrangement of particles in a liquid, in a gas substance, the particles are far apart from each. Then what happens if we cool this substance? If we cool this substance, the intermolecular force of attraction between the particles will gain its strength. Then from there, the particles will start coming closer to each. Because of that, there will be a change of state from, there will be a change from one state into another state. Now, since the particles are becoming closer, instead of going far apart, they are becoming closer. Because of that, coming closer, then we are expecting to reduce in volume. Maybe let's have an example. Maybe we have 10 people. We have 10 people, then they are spread out. They have covered a certain area. Now, what happens if you were to tell those 10 people to come closer? So as they are coming closer, you can see that the area that they are going to cover after they have come closer is very small compared to their original space. So that was the concept that you're supposed to give here. So we can say when the substance is cooled down, it will contract. It will contract due to the intermolecular force of attraction. Then there is a lot that we can say. It's not only this. We can also say that when a substance is cooled down, the particles will start coming closer to each, and because of that, there will be a reduction in volume. Then we move on to question B. With reference to energy changes, what type of process takes place in A? So let's say the process that we are looking at is from gas to liquid, or maybe from gas to solid. From gas to liquid is condensation. From gas direct into solid, we have sublimation. Now, all of these two processes, they all involve cooling. You need to cool this substance. So we are like removing the heat from the particles. So what process is that? So we are going to have exothermic process. So remember, all the processes that involves cooling down, they are all exothermic reactions. So exo is like exit. So this is all about heat is given out. So if you put water in a fridge, that is exothermic reaction or exothermic process because the heat is given out. But for processes like melting, evaporation, in fact, let me not look at sublimation. Sublimation is the forward. Let's look at deposition, because deposition is what tells us the change from gas into a solid. So let's look at deposition, not sublimation. So sublimation is you have to heat. Sublimation, heating, not condensation, melting, heating, evaporation, heating. All these are endothermic because heat must be there. Then we move on to question C. Explain why wet clothes dry faster on a warmer day than on a colder day. So this is because the process of evaporation is much higher on a warmer day than a colder day. So the drying of a substance has to do with the process of evaporation. So we just want the process of evaporation to be at a fast rate. We move on to question 3. The experimental setup that follows show a mixture of sand and iodine crystals in an evaporating dish. Question A. Describe how the mixture of sand and iodine crystals can appropriately be separated. If you look at sand is insoluble, so it can't dissolve in water, or even if no matter how much we may apply the heat, nothing will happen to sand. Now this whole question, it was about the separation technique. Now the concept was about the behavior of iodine crystals. So how can we separate sand from iodine or iodine from sand? Now let's look at the iodine crystals. So what happens if we heat the iodine crystals? Iodine is an example of a material that undergoes sublimation. So examples of substances that undergo sublimation, like carbon dioxide, which is in solid state, iodine crystals, and ammonium chloride. These are the most of which you need to have at least in mind, in case the question next time comes like state the substances that can undergo sublimation. So if iodine can undergo sublimation, what are we supposed to do? We need to heat the mixture. So after the mixture is heated, the iodine will sublimize. What is the sublimation? So the sublimation is just the change from a solid to a gas. Okay. So what happens if we start heating the mixture? The iodine crystals, which is in solid state, will change into a gas, and from there the iodine crystals in gaseous state will now escape the mixture, leaving the sand in evaporating dish. So say by heating the mixture, and the iodine crystals will escape, will, let's say, leave the evaporation, will leave the evaporation dish through the process of sublimation. So that was the concept behind this. Move on to question B. Explain why bottled mineral water is not pure water. I know we have the concept of this to be pure. Maybe they consider this purity in terms of if we have microorganisms, but scientifically, if this water undergoes a certain criterion, we may find it to be impure. So what exactly are they talking about if you look at mineral water as not pure water? So the whole thing is that it contains some mineral ions. So that is what makes this water not to be pure. So first we'll say, because bottled water comes from the ground, so it contains some mineral ions, So water that contains ions is the type of water that has the ability to conduct electricity. But the pure water, the distilled water, cannot conduct electricity according to the concept of science. Then C, give one criterion for purity of a substance. So meaning, how can we tell that, what can we use to test for purity of a substance? So the first one, we can say fixed boiling point. A pure substance has a fixed boiling point. For example, the boiling point of pure water is 100. 100. Then the other one, fixed melting point, which is the melting point of ice, which is water, is 0 degrees Celsius. Then apart from that, fixed density. The density of pure water is about 1.00 grams per cubic centimeters. We move on to question 4. Figure 4.1 shows an electronic structure for element Q. Roman number 1, name the element Q. For us to name the element Q, first we are going to count the number of electrons that it has. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So there are 17 electrons. Now what of the protons? The protons will also be 17, since as long as it's neutral, the number of protons equals the number of electrons. Now for a question like this, you just have to go on the periodic table, you check the element that has the atomic number of 17. So you'd find that this is a chlorine element. Then Roman number 2, state the period of the periodic table where element Q belongs. It is in period 3. Now, how do you know the period? You just have to count the number of shells. So shell 1, 2, 3. The number of shells determines the period, while the number of electrons in the outermost shell tells you the group in which that particular element is found. So because it has 3 shells. Okay, let's move on to Roman number 3. Explain how an atom of element Q acquires chemical stability. So chlorine is a nonmetal, and nonmetal, they acquire stability by gaining electron. By gaining an electron, since it only gains 1. Explain what you understand by the term nuclear number. So nuclear number is the other name for mass number. This is the same as what is meant by mass number. So this is the total. This is the total number. The total number of protons and neutrons found in the nucleus of an atom of any given element. Or you can just say the sum of the keys, the number of protons and neutrons found in the nucleus of an atom. Okay, now let's have the last question, question 5. Distinguish between an acid and a base. An acid can be considered as a proton donor, while a base a proton receiver. So an acid is a proton donor, while a base is a proton receiver. Then if we want, we can also say an acid produces a positive hydrogen ions when dissolved in water, while a base produces a negative hydroxide ion when dissolved in water. So that's also a distinct that we can give. Then for the last question B, explain what you understand by the term salt. So let's first begin by giving an example. Salt, an example of salt, common salt, is sodium chloride. Then sodium is a metal. A metal forms a positive ions. Then chlorine is a nonmetal. A nonmetal forms a negative ion, which is an ion. So the first thing that we've seen here, any salt must have a positive ion and a negative ion. So a salt is an ionic compound. That is our first step. Now let's say we have the base, sodium hydroxide, reacting with hydrochloric acid. Then we know that from the base we get the sodium, which is positive. From the acid we get the chloride, which is negative. So a salt is just an ionic compound which contains a positive ion from a base and a negative ion from an acid. Okay, so this is where we are going to end. So for question 6 up to 9, you can just search this. The video is already there. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.